webinar for today. We're going to be talking about research that we can conduct in relation to ILPs. You'll see that it's research we can also relate directly to college and career readiness in a wider frame as well, because we're going to focus a lot on social emotional learning indicators as a nice way of doing this as well. So this is going to be a conversation. Lisa and I just went through the PowerPoint, and there's a lot of information here, and what we're hoping for is that you're going to use the chat box, or you're going to stop us on the phone, and we're going to follow through and just dialogue with it. And if Lisa has anything to add specifically to some of the pieces, she's going to jump in as well. So we want to make this a dialogue and a conversation. There's lots of information we're going to be sharing today, so don't let it go too fast. Definitely slow it down as you have questions. So you've got I think we've already got everything figured out on muting and different things, because I can't hear anyone. But if you mute the phones while you're on and then unmute when you're ready to talk, and use the chat box regularly as well, and we should be just fine. Here is the agenda for today. We've got a website that we've prepared for you. Is basically in response to Worcester School District asking about this early on, and we thought we better get something up. And since then, we've met with Leominster, and I think there's one other district that's interested. So today's webinar is really in reference to that website, and what we're going to do is walk through the resources that are there and then talk about how they can be used to conduct some research. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So this is the website. This is, we thought we'd do some screenshots, and then I'm going to go through more in depth. What you see at the very beginning is this nice graphic of a cover of a report. And what that report has is all of the different research I'm going to be talking about, most of it today, is actually in writing in that report. So it just shows kind of how we used the knowledge and what we learned from the study we did. This was done originally with 14 schools in 4 states. And it provided a nice way to talk about ILPs, learn about their promises or their effectiveness as a promising practice. And so all the things that I'm going to be talking about in different measures, you'll find in there, and you'll kind of see how we used it in putting together a larger story. On this page is the quantitative measures, at least this part of the page, and I'm going to go through both of these studies just to give you a highlight of the kind of data that's there, and mostly to show you the kind of validity and the predictive analytics that are involved in some of this data. In other words, it's important, these measures that we're going to be looking at have relevance to the school and to helping to assess whether the school's on target in supporting their students. So this is an example of the measures that are available: importance of school, academic self-efficacy, social connections, academic stress, which we'll call well-being a little bit as well, and motivation. This is one study that was done in Denver Public Schools where we took a look. We had them actually assessed as they were leaving middle school. And so as they went in through high school, we then took a look at their outcomes. That would be grades, attendance, it was behavior reports. It was all the kinds of indications of whether or not they're being successful, on track to graduation, things like that. And what you're seeing is that these variables were able to discriminate successfully between those students who eventually became successful versus those students who became at risk. And so it's getting that kind of predictive analytics that these social emotional learning skills are definitely tied to future success of students. And so the more of this they gain, the more likely they are to be successful. And a lot of the things that we're leveraging within the ILP, you'll see connect to a lot of these pieces. So, Lisa, and I know Massachusetts is starting to really ramp up the whole concept of social emotional learning, I believe, right? I mean, this is something that's happening. If you want to talk a little bit about that and all.
We have we've got a couple of internally here at the state level. We're forming some work groups that are intra-department, so that we can really go through from curriculum and assessments into college and career readiness and into academic supports. So we've got some intra groups happening. we passed some legislation. Actually, it came through the Gun Control Act here in Massachusetts.
Oh, wow.
That required the resurrection of a Safe and Supportive Commission, Safe and Supportive Learning Environment Commission, which is revamping our behavioral health and public school assessment tool, which was created back in 2008 but has been pretty dormant. So I think that's a very exciting piece that's going to engage a lot of schools.
All right. So I want to pause here. We want this to be a conversation. We've got lots of data to show you, and we don't want to rush through any of it. So if you have questions, please jump in. You can use the chat box or just jump off of mute and pause the conversation if you would. And I'll just take a second here. I know I'm on a page that's rather complicated, and I'm going to explain it in just a second, but just want to pause if there's any questions. Then I'll take that as a green light to move forward, but want to encourage you to definitely ask away as we go through this. So the study I showed a moment ago, this one, this was done with a school district, with the Denver Public Schools. It was a very large data set. This was done with the 14 schools that I referenced before. And so what was nice was by each school may have only had a few, 100 students or, 80 students or 200 students, but across the 14 districts, we were able to collapse the data in a way that we could do some really nice sophisticated analyses. This is actually data that was done specifically with students with disabilities, and it's a publication that's listed on the website. So we were able to get a large enough sample, which is very hard when you're working with students with disabilities to get a large enough sample. But because we were working across, with this national group, we were able to gather enough where we could put together a nice path analysis. And what it's doing is it's showing that quality learning experiences, in this case, access to quality academic supports, so quality learning experiences were things like the academic. It was around access to career and workforce development, which of course the ILP is leveraging, personal development and leadership skills. We'll call it, there's a thing called connecting activities, which is how you're learning about the systems and how to work with them, family engagement, and then also engagement in ILPs. And so you see that we're kind of, basically this study was a way of saying, okay, so the quality learning experiences then was a nice way of saying the context of being able to create this school environment related then to the positive career search self-efficacy, which is really what we're doing in ILPs, helping them engage in more self-exploration, career planning management, those kinds of things, that leading to goal setting, and then that really setting off the academics, the motivation to go to school, the academic self-efficacy, and then we're able to show how it led to GPA and career decision-making issues. And there's more to it in this that I'm not going to be able to go into right now, but I'm just showing you that if more districts, if many of you decide you want to do this kind of survey, this is the kind of thing we'll be able to produce as a collective for your study. We probably won't have enough to break down for students with disabilities, but we could certainly do the general population, which is, again, a really nice piece to have to provide some evidence base on it. And I can pause here if there's questions. I know I've gone over it briefly, but if there's questions on it, please ask away. No? Okay. So on the website is also, if you decide you want to look at some measures, if there's some you want to use, they're there for you to request, and we can get those to you. This section of the website is around the qualitative measures and then the ILP implementation. So I'm going to walk you through what we have for the qualitative measures. The first are, these are the questions. Yes?
I'm just going to interrupt you. Lourdes has a question. Can the surveys be used even if the school isn't using the ILP?
Absolutely. Yeah, because what you're seeing are really questions related to college and career readiness as a whole, and we know that the non-cognitive factors are really the ones that are going to be related to whether they really want to achieve in a post-secondary setting and whether they're going to complete. So absolutely, that was the reason why we did it, was we knew we could get buy-in. And if we could get the educators seeing that these are impactful and supportive of the needs that they have as a school, it would also leverage some of the college and career readiness components to it, because these are all intimately related. And that's kind of what the model is showing, that by doing career development, we're leveraging better grades, right? And by doing career development, we've got a motivated student who wants to learn. And for the school counselors, it's showing them that they can do the national model of personal social development, academic, as well as career development, all through this ILP process. So it's kind of it was designed to move the markers towards ILPs, but it's not dependent on schools using ILPs at all. It's just showing them the interrelationship of all of it. I see Reyes typing, and Livonia, thank you, and jump in if questions come up. Okay, thanks, Reyes. So the student focus group questions, these were ones that we did after the first year of our study, and this is something that if you're implementing ILPs or whatever you're implementing, it was nice to go in to see how people were experiencing it. And so we did a bunch of focus groups. These were the questions we asked, and you can certainly modify them if, for your own use. But it was nice to be able to get kind of a gauge of whether or not, at least for the ILPs, were the educators and students finding positive, improvements of it. And I'll show you a report in a little bit about what it looks like when we reported it out. But and then we also had parent group questions as well. So we've talked with a couple of schools about doing this, and I think it is a really nice way and kind of easy to just get a sense of whether or not how people are responding. And what we found was when it was being done well and it was in a classroom where the teachers really bought into it, the student and the parents were just enamored. They loved it. And in places where it wasn't being done well, it wasn't happening so well, which obviously you would expect. But in those cases where it was happening well, the level of articulation that the students and the parents could have about the impact they saw it having was pretty amazing. And the same with educators, too. They could talk about really the kind of transformative effect they were seeing with some of their students. So that was what really got the federal government, at least that was funding my previous research on this, it got them really jazzed about it, that there was something here that could have transformative qualities if it was implemented correctly. This is a vocational identity interview. It can be done online where they can just respond to open questions, or it can be done in a formal interview. And what it does is it tries to get a sense of where they are on the career readiness spectrum. So have they identified some goals? Have they demonstrated some sense of self-exploration where they really thought about it? Can they tell us some details about the careers that they're interested in? Are they able to tell us about the academic pathways that it takes to get there? What are they doing now, kind of courses they're taking and outside learning that they might be doing to prepare for it? Those kinds of students that were answering in those ways and really had some detail, we were able to show, because we have a large enough data set, we're able to show that identity, that kind of achieved identity from some of the identity models we're looking at, that those individuals are getting better grades. They were less stressed. They were more confident. They were setting goals. They just had you could tell that they were operating differently in the school based on that. And so this is a nice, these are pretty good. There's a lot of research and theory that went into how these questions were selected, and I can certainly share out more detail about that. But again, it's the kind of thing that you can start with, and if your group wants to change the questions, certainly you can. But it gives some pretty rich data that can be used to see where the students are, and I think it could be used very easily, even as a pre and post. It can be used as kind of an annual gauge to see as the students are getting into ILPs, whether it's moving them towards that kind of career identity or the career readiness that we're looking for. And again, I have the rubrics that you can use to analyze that data, so it's not like you have to start from scratch on that. Now, this was something that we had a webinar a while back, meaning I think it was in November, where we met with 3 vendors that do the career information system. And in that, we were discussing the kinds of data and reports that they would have. This particular table here is a paper that I wrote that was describing the kinds of ways we could study implementation and impact of ILPs by using a combination of the systems as well as the student information system. So it's dependent on the two talking together so that we can actually see that when students have engaged in what kinds of ILP activities, are we seeing changes in their grades? Are we seeing the kinds of course selections that would be heading towards AP courses? Are we seeing a more college-oriented program of study, things like that, which is what we would probably see in your work right away. That would be the earliest. Certainly retention rates in some of our schools, which we're working with, I mean, that's part of it. Are they showing up again? Are they more likely to show back up? Are their attendance patterns different as a result of the ILPs? Those are things that we can actually assess if we have a combination of being able to look at what they did and how engaged they were in the ILP activities as reflected within these career information systems. So it would be things like if they've done the interest assessments, have they filled out, have they done, how much searching did they do in relation to this, how much of their ILP did they fill up in the e-portfolio. Those things can all be coded in a way to say kind of like depth of engagement. And then the idea is the more engaged they are in those activities, we would expect to see some kind of impact. So some of these impact indicators are longitudinal, obviously, but it just gives you an idea of the kind of the ways of thinking about it. Any questions or thoughts on that?
So Reyes is typing.
All right. So let me pause here because we're gonna move into I'm gonna show you an example in a second. But is this helpful so far? Is it I just need to get a sense of where, if we need to go into more depth on something or pause on something, it'd be helpful to know whether this information so far is if it's helpful in answering some of the questions you're hoping to get answered.
So Reyes' question initially is, does your plan for the future have its own evaluation product?
Yeah, they don't really have their own evaluation. What they have, though, are reports, and it's from those reports that we can conduct an evaluation. So we can find out how many students have actually entered information in their portfolio. We can find out what information was there, so how many of them did an interest survey, how many of them were involved in looking at colleges, how many have identified post-secondary kind of colleges they're interested in, the careers they're interested in. So it gives you some depth of that, and then you can always add more because as you're doing different curriculum activities, they can write up things for that and enter that in as well, and in doing so, you can evaluate that as part of it as well. So it's sort of I guess what I want to say is I believe the data is there, and no one has mined it in a way that we can really showcase quality of implementation and its linkage to these academic outcomes. And once we do that, I think we'll get the return on investment indicators that we need ultimately to keep this moving. So Ray, you said you ordered some of the tests, but I'm not sure what you mean by that. So we may have to do that offline, and I can certainly get that clarified and work that out. But your plan for the future should have some reports. They all have them. They have them in a little different format and all, but otherwise they're pretty much, there are reports there. This is from Colorado. Okay. I'm sorry.
It's Lisa. I just wanted to add that, again, Ray, as you're working with New Bedford may need some prompts to know that they have some of those, so that those reports are available, because often the reports need to be run at the school level. If that's what you're looking at, a specific school. So
that's right.
That would be a great conversation to have with those folks to see if they're aware of the numbers and kinds of reports that they can be looking at.
Thank you, Lisa. So two things on that. One is the school counselors are the ones who generally have the power around that information, and so it's working directly with the school counselors to make sure they're accessing those reports. The second is you're going to look at it and say, but I don't know how to do it, and that's okay because the vendor, in this case you're talking about your plan for the future vendor, should be able and willing to give you the training to be able to do that. And so their job as a vendor is to teach you how to use their system, and as you ask these questions and get the overview, And it may take you 2 sessions. You may need 1 session just to learn how to use the functionality of the system as a student would. And then the second would be to work on a second one just on reports and the kind of data that you can get to monitor. So their job is to make you competent. And so if you're not feeling like you've got a good handle on it yet, let's go back to the vendor and have them do more personalized training for your district.
And just one other thought, Scott, is that with what I've seen a lot is with the use of advisory as the place to work on ILPs, it may not just be counselors anymore that can generate those reports. For some, it's going to be those advisors. It all depends on the level.
Well, what happens in some of the systems, and having worked in a system, I can tell you the way the system I used worked, and I assume that they all are similar. But what happened is that the school counselor or whoever the head person is that's assigned in that school to kind of be the quarterback of the whole system, they can assign privileges to teachers to have those groups. But there is a level of skill set that they need to have to be able to do that. So definitely, if you're doing it as an advisory, you want to have a specific training where everyone is there to see how that and who that individual is and how that person go about doing it. So you've got a good check and balance. But then once that occurs, that's awesome, right? Because now you've got the teachers that will be responsible. They can go into the portfolios, kind of check with the students, and build that relational conversation, both in the classroom but also offline, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're not sure what you mean by the vendor and does the school get access. So each of these, so the online career information systems that are what runs the ILPs. We've talked with Naviance, we talked with your Plan for the Future, and Mass Career Information System. Those are the 3. There's also Career Cruising, which would probably be the 4 of the more popular ones that would be around Massachusetts. I think, Lisa, is that fair enough?
Yeah, definitely. That's it.
And so each of those, so the district has one of those systems. The Year Plan for the Future is the one that the state has paid for, so it's free. Mass CIS is being paid from a different vendor, and it's also free to the district. But a lot of districts are also buying a very expensive product called Naviance, which does many of the same things as well as has a lot of awesome bells and whistles for school counselors when they're getting ready to get students into the college track. So some people have bought into that. And then Career Cruising is an alternative vendor from those 3. It's also a fee for service. Those vendors, which you're using their system to develop the ILP, which as a document is the portfolio. Their job is to train the school in how to use that system that they have. And so when I say vendor, it's referring to those, and who they're training is whoever the school is asking to come to a webinar or engage in the activity. It's usually done by webinar. Sometimes, like your Plan for the Future may run around the state. I don't know, but usually it's done by webinar these days, and it's very nice. And then, okay, so let's see. Yep, you're able to get copies of the measures, and you'll be able to see which ones are there. Let's see. Is anyone using Naviance on reporting? Be helpful. Yeah, good. So Kim, you're absolutely on target. All of the vendors have that same capability where you can identify the kinds of career interests that your population of students have identified, which is great for job fairs, for work-based learning, if you're trying to bring an employer in or you're trying to figure out which employers do you want to engage in more deeply. They all have those kinds of skill sets, which is great. Now, Livonia, did I miss any other questions?
No, I think you're all set.
Okay. So, Lars, we can actually, we can go through and take a look at the assessments and think about what you're wanting. I'm going to go through the research questions and show you what things look like in a minute. So I'm going to give you a more detailed example of what we can report back to your school, to the district that you're working with. So we'll show that in just a second. This is this ICAP process from Colorado. What this is it's taking a look at the quality of the implementation, which is an important thing. And so they're a little farther along. They've already got their schools for a number of years. They've been using the ILPs. They call it ICAP. And it's also aligned to their particular implementation areas that they're interested in, and in Wisconsin. And in Massachusetts, we'll have some different titles. We'd be looking at some different elements because we've got different language we're using for the different ILP categories of things. So, but this is just an idea of something that's really good to do. Kind of think of as a district, where do we see ourselves? And this is only one small page of a multi-page document that's on the website that you can link to. But I wanted to also show you that, you know, this next one that I'm showing you right now is from Wisconsin, and they're just starting it. They're in their first year of full-scale implementation. And what's nice is they're basically talking at the level of, are we getting buy-in? And I think that's a nice place to be starting from. And so this type of implementation evaluation might be something you want to incorporate. So if you're doing focus groups with parents, educators, and teachers, you can also kind of go to some other people and just say, hey, how are we feeling about this? Are we seeing anything, you know, is it moving any of the levers that we're interested in as a district? So, so there's multiple ways to think about gathering research data and doing this kind of implementation evaluation. And then the last part I'm not going to go into, but it's just some of the other webinars we've done. And so in here is the one we had with the vendors. So if you go into the community of practice link, you're going to find this webinar that we're recording today, but you're also going to find the other ones we've done. And you can access that. So you can see exactly what the Naviance Mass CIS and your plan for the future, the people we had representing those, what they did. It was pretty nice. They did a lot of nice things. Lavon, you remind me, are there PowerPoints also on there as well?
There are PowerPoints, and that link for that specific page is actually now in the chat box. And so all of the information, the PowerPoints, the questions, is all right there.
You're awesome. Perfect. Okay. Now, let's talk about specific research. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the kind of research ideas we can do, and then I'm going to show you, I'm going to flip to an actual example of where we built the research back for the school district to be able to communicate. So it's in a PowerPoint format. Over here in the chat box that you've got over, or not chat box, but the files box, you actually have a PDF of the written report that the district received, which is something that we're talking about being able to prepare for you all as well. So it would be like, here's a district report based on the data, and then what I'm going to show you is the PowerPoint that we sent with it, and then we help them learn how to use the data and communicate it to their other teachers, to the district officials, and different things like that. So, but the idea is you can use the SEL measures that I showed you to build this personalized report that I'm about to show you. I'll flip to 3. We can also do the focus groups, and we can summarize that, and you'll see that in the PowerPoint as well. A third option, which is listed here as number 2, is we can use a couple of these measures as a pre and a post for doing either an experimental or quasi-experimental study to see whether ILPs are really having an impact. So we did this in Singapore, where they did only 4 sessions as a country. So imagine that, the whole country doing it, and we had 4 sessions, and then we were able to see whether or not those 4 sessions were related to improvements in their career search self-efficacy and improving any decision-making challenges they were having. And we also used that, I showed you that vocational kind of career readiness identity measure. We also used that, and we were able to showcase whether or not there was changes in their career readiness, and that was effective as well. I'm not sure we would go to that level for this first year, but it's certainly something we can do. It's not off the table at all. We can help you with that. So what I'm going to show you now, I'm going to move to a PowerPoint, and what I'm going to show you in it then is what 1 and 3 looks like when it gets reported back. And I'm suggesting that this is something that's viable that we can do within this project. And I can walk you through the steps of what we do for that. But right now I'm going to do something very fancy. I'm proud of myself that I can do this. I'm feeling very good about myself today. There we are. And look at that. And up it comes. So I don't want to see any oohs and ahs in the chat box. They're fine. That's good. I can hear clapping sounds. Clapping's good. At any rate, so yes, I know it should be that simple, but it's taking me a year to learn how to do just what I just did there. But anyway, here we go. So here is a a PowerPoint that we gave to Timberline High School. It was one of our 14 schools. Oh, thank you, Bianca and Lourdes. Thank you. I've got to beg sometimes for my support, but that's okay. I'm good for it. What we did here was we put together kind of a background of the study, of who we were, what we were doing, which we would do with the MICCR project as well, explaining a part of the MICCR piece and where the funding is from and what we're doing, because that way you don't have to remember when you're trying to give a presentation. Our goal was to make it easy for you to get up as a district and say to anyone, here's the data and here's what it says. We had two sets of analyses you'll see. One is their responses to those social emotional learning. What we did here was we had 14 schools, and so we took that as the average, the comparison group, if you will, and then we took the mean for each of the different subscales for that specific school district so they could see how they compare across those social emotional learning skill areas for their district, and they can kind of see are they up or are they down in terms of the majority of the comparison group. The second report is where we took the focus group data from each of the schools that we worked with and then summarized the main themes that came from that and then put that in a PowerPoint as well. So it gave both the quantitative picture in terms of here's where we are, but then also the qualitative of how the ILP experience is going. With demographics, in this case, you see that this was a very small district, only 35 students. So it was, even though it was a small district, we are comparing them to our larger sample of 1,700 students. So they're able to participate in the study, use the data, even though it's a smaller set in terms of their own particular districts. So this would be an example where if you're already looking at the PDF report, if you're looking at social connections, you're going to find that we have a whole page describing the nature of social connections, what the subscales are, what they mean. So the information is there in more detailed format. At the bottom of the PowerPoint, we actually wrote some of those out for the district too, so that if they're giving the presentation, they would have their notes to be able to talk from. So we're trying to build their capacity for being able to talk about this research. And then we give them bar graphs. And we just found that bar graphs were the easiest way for them. I mean, I love doing regression analyses and beta values, but it's really hard to explain it to a novice group. But when we show them bar graphs, everything was perfect. And so the districts preferred it this way, and it made total sense that we could explain the nature of these and the importance of these through that. So here's an example where Timberline can look at their peer connections, and they can say, wow, our students are reporting stronger peer connections, but, oh, our teacher connections are a little bit lower than the average. Now, we're not needing to worry about statistical significance here. All we're doing is creating a dialogue. We're helping the educators kind of sit down and say, what do you think about this? And maybe connections just isn't the major issue for them, and that's okay because we've got lots of other data. Here's how we're looking at motivation, and we've got three components to that, or two components to that, whether they're enjoying school and whether they're finding it meaningful. And I think it's kind of funny at Timberline, they're not enjoying it, they don't like it, but they find it meaningful. That's not, usually those are correlated more positively, but it's kind of interesting. So it would allow for dialogue. And again, in the PDF is the discussion about what motivation is, how these were measured, what they look like. We really want them to know, even down to the item level, what these measures are looking at, so they can. So as educators, you can feel confident about the data that you're reporting on. We looked at stress, and we've got 3 different levels there in terms of academic, social, and financial stress. Well-being is a really interesting one, and looking at this as kind of a barometer. This is one of the core outcomes of really psychological and emotional distress, but it would be under that personal social outcome piece that's so important within the American School Counseling model, and kind of taking a look at where that is. We have academic self-efficacy, which is one of the big variables in this whole process. So taking a look at here, Timberline's coming out a little bit lower on some of the confidence, so that would be some question marks as to what might be going on around social and test taking. And then we've also, I'm going to skip this one here. This is the career decidedness measure that we use. It's from my colleagues in Italy, and it kind of gives an idea of whether, what's missing here. Are they indecisive, which is really more of a personality concern. It's really, that's a complex area. but certainly undecided and lack of information should be something that's getting leveraged right from the ILP process. So this is why we would use it as part of the pre and post. Are they feeling they have more information? And high, by the way, is bad. So in this case, students are reporting that they actually have less information available than the norm group, although they're a little less undecided. And then career search self-efficacy is the other one that's directly connected to the ILP, that it should be leveraging their sense of exploration skills and planning and things like that. And so this is one that's an important component to see kind of where the students are, and are they already, in this case, Timberline's a little low in areas, but they're high in some, so we kind of see where they fall out in that. Goal setting, another very important one that gets leveraged through career development and ILPs. What we find is that as they gain more sense of career search self-efficacy, they're then planning, and as they're planning, they're obviously setting goals. And so the two most important ones here are goal setting and use of resources. So it's the question of, are they actively engaged in goal setting, and are they looking for opportunities to be able to address those goals? And in other words, to learn the skills that it takes to achieve their goals, to look for opportunities that will enable them to reach their goals, things like that. So really around self-regulation and proactivity, and it's a pretty exciting variable. And as we leverage change in that, it's pretty powerful, the impact it has. I mentioned this earlier. We were talking about that path analysis, and it had the quality learning experiences. That comes from a transition framework, a national transition framework called Guideposts for Success. And the first 5 of these are the ones that nationally, and this is based on child development literature, these are the areas that all youth need in order to successfully transition from basically secondary education into adulthood. They need the academic prep, we call it today college readiness. They need the career prep and work-based learning. Youth development and leadership is a big issue. The connecting activities I said briefly last time, it's that ability to know who do I go to for information, who do I go to for resources. Especially for our youth today who are so connected all the time, connecting activities turns out to be pretty important in terms of supporting their readiness to transition. And then family involvement and support is interesting because it's around family involvement in this career decision-making process, which is kind of fun. So it's very specific around that engagement. And then engage in ILPs is something we added as a way of helping to look at ILPs. Now, again, the schools that we were working with, the 14, had been engaged. These were states that had already been using ILPs. For your district, and Lourdes was saying, it may be that we need to pick and choose and take out some items or take out some areas in year 1 because they're not relevant, or maybe we change ILPs to say something more like career development. So it's something more specific, and then it can be kind of a pre-post if you want to do it annually. So there's things we can do around that. And this is an example of then kind of how the data looked and what they were able to do with that. And then finally, as we go through, as we were saying, then the second part of the PowerPoint was around the focus group sample. And so in this case, we talk about who got, how many people were involved, how many, participated in this whole thing, and then kind of walks through some of the results and giving some, some overall pieces of what was found. It helps to be able to give some of the real information of what was happening. In this particular one, because we were working with 14, we didn't go into specific examples of what some of the statements that were given, but we can certainly do that more, especially with a smaller set of schools involved. And we would be helping you guys do this, and so you'll be able to use all the qualitative information that's available. And that is about that. You have this PowerPoint next to you as well in the file section. So if I flip through some things too quickly and you want to go back, you've got the files there to draw from. Let's see what else. So yeah, so a lot of information that kind of comes out of this, and so that is the idea there. And we want to now have more dialogue and questions. So what are your thoughts? Was it that we went over too quickly, or what is it that you want to go more in depth on? We're having a race in the chat box, I think.
And really,
Now,
if somebody wanted to unmute themselves, they could ask the question.
Please unmute away. Unmute away, yes.
Yeah,
one of the things I want to say is this was the first year that we did this. And so I'm giving you what it looked like in the first year. In the second year, we actually had more data. And because the district had gone through the first year, they were ready for the more sophisticated data. So we actually did present them all with the path analysis that was based on the larger sample and help them learn how to interpret it so they could explain its impact. And we broke it down for them and things so they could talk from it. And we also broke down the identity things that I talked about, the qualitative. That was very extensive as a group, but we were able to, even in those schools, kind of showcase where their students were on some of the identity development pieces around career readiness. And so the first year was really getting the temperature gauge, seeing if things are moving in the right direction, what are the initial reactions to what was going on. The second year gave us an opportunity to do a lot more. Yep, so Lourdes, needing this to make sure it fits with the school. This is great.
Right.
That's right on target. Yep.
So actually, Lisa, Lourdes is working with Fall River, and so I'm just turning it to you for a moment if you have some knowledge about what's happening in Fall River around ILPs already.
I actually I don't have any information about Fall River. I wasn't aware are they a MICCR district?
They are a MICCR district.
I missed that. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. So I don't have as much information about Fall River as I would like. And I guess it would be very early stages since we haven't had much connection with them. I was wondering, Lourdes just wrote that my understanding is that Fall River has decided not to use the ILPs, which doesn't surprise me. They've got a lot of initiatives going on. They had a huge change of leadership at the high school level in Fall River, so a new project might not have been on their plate. But I think we'll need to pursue that and find that out.
We can, and I would say, Lourdes, that what you could do in the process, and certainly we need to work it around where they're ready, but we can also propose engaging in this initial survey as a way of them doing their own needs assessment about what are some of the issues that are going on. And from that, they can at least then craft from a database standpoint what are their next steps, where do they need to start. If kids are coming out with lots of stress, and lots of health issues, then maybe we need to be focusing on emotional well-being and mental health issues as part of college readiness. If it's coming out with they're just totally lost and have no sense of goals and where they're going, well, then maybe that points them back towards the career development. But the goal is to really help the district come to a shared understanding of the challenges they're facing. And what we're trying to do, both in MICCR as well as, of course, your involvement as well, is to make that an evidence-based conversation. So rather than it being a conversation about our own beliefs and about our own history, let's make it about the data that's coming right from the students so they can kind of drive the discourse. And I think that there's such a wide array among these social emotional learning assessments, and certainly others can be added, but the model does help. We've seen it happen a lot. It does help the district come to that shared definition, and from there they can more effectively engage in collective activity.
Scott, I was wondering if I think a lot of the participants in our call here are researchers as opposed to school-based people. Is that a correct assessment?
We're mixed. We're mixed.
So I'm curious if there has been any kinds of assessment done in any of the schools, of students and even needs similar to what Timberline has done. Have any of the researchers been reached out to provide some support in that, or in the creation of a research tool? I'd be curious to hear what folks' experiences are between school and researcher.
Great. Does anyone want to jump in on that? Andy or Aaron, Kim?
This is Erin from Barnesville High School. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Hi, Erin.
great.
Hi, how are you? We're just starting to look at the pre and post tests that we're going to use. And our researcher, Bianca, is helping us out. MICCR is helping us out with trying to figure out which surveys we're going to use. But we're going to put those in probably about 2-3 weeks. We're going to pre-test our students, and then we're going to do the ILP with a pilot group, and then post-test them in the spring and run a focus group, and then hopefully present data next year.
Great.
That's great, Erin. Thank you. Good to hear that. So,
Yeah,
I guess, yeah. So I don't know if anybody else has that going on within their schools and in their partnering with researchers.
So Michelle is working with Leominster, and she's created a note in the chat box. Let me just scroll up. So they're in the process of looking into the focus group interviews and how they want to modify some of the questions. So some of the focus group questions that you described, Scott, from your study. And that they're also trying to see which quantitative measures might align with their ILP process.
Great. And I noticed Kim
Great.
too. Kim just wrote it. Kim wrote into the chat also.
Hi, this is Kim Dixon from Greater Lawrence Technical School.
Hi, Kim.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hey,
Well,
Kim.
we don't call our project the ILP. We're not actually doing it as an ILP. As a vocational school, that is a large part of our practice. Our
Right.
students come in, and we try to set them up with careers, and they study those as the time they're here. We have about 18 different vocational places that they could go. As we
Right.
started looking at this project, we're like, this is our business, so we need to make this great for us. We have found that about 25% of our students are actually going on later on in their careers and succeeding in college. Again, we are an inner city school, or not inner city, but a lot of our feeder students, about 80% of them come from the city. So we want to take an overall look at the school as a whole. So I've looked at the whole community and taken a survey from the census data of what the community looks like, what the business structure looks like outside. And we've also taken a look at how we're polling our students when they come in, what their career choices are when they first get here, and how those align with what they're feeling as they get to be seniors. We're also looking at behavior plans, and as a management team is looking at a whole resource of data for students to identify at-risk students based on their attendance, their grades, discipline, and they're meeting 8 times this year as part of an overall project to improve our student success in career and college readiness.
Yeah,
That's great.
Yeah, and I think it's great, Kim, because I think it's taking, especially in the vocational schools, it's really taking the required by law career plan issue and bringing, this whole thing is bringing it to almost an ILP kind of level, but a true valuable tool that can be used for career development for students in the technical school.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're really responding to that, Kim, and really taking, because, I mean, it's required by law, so you do minimum or maximum, and we all know that, but I think coupling this with the ILP conversations is really bringing the career plans to a new level for a lot of vocational schools. So kudos to you for pushing that.
Yeah, I think interesting things is that nationally, as we look nationally at ILPs, the work you're doing in the technical college, what's mandated, is considered an ILP. It's basic, and they go in many names and they come in many forms in terms of the titles. But the essential qualities of what you've described and what you're trying to do, it fits with the kind of national piece. And the Career Tech Ed has been involved in this from the beginning. And if we didn't have your career pathways and career clusters and all of the different things that go into that, we can't do ILPs. It's all a function of helping the individual kind of drive the process so that they're able to identify what those goals are, and now they have the tools because of what you're doing in career and tech ed to really see how it aligns with different post-secondary opportunities and then makes more relevant the kinds of core education things they're looking at. Where it takes off from that, so that's the core of the ILP piece, which I think is very consistent with what you're describing. Where it goes to another level, which hadn't been really thought about, but where we were nationally seeing as we were working with these districts, is we were getting reports of how students were then naturally going out and finding the work-based learning opportunities, and they were looking at other kinds of learning, and you could see that they were now taking charge of their own process once they established that goal. And we were finding that that was a powerful thing that hadn't been really discussed or hadn't been really thought that was going to occur, that the student was basically pulling themselves up and reaching to higher aspirations. And we've got students in special ed courses that have IEPs that are choosing regular diplomas and looking for post-secondary in a way they never thought would happen before. So those were things that were quite remarkable and exciting that came out of it, and has helped us to kind of almost like come up with ILP version 2, which is, wow, how can we support more of that to happen, right? How do we create that? But definitely the work you're doing in the career tech ed world and the Voc Tech high schools here in Massachusetts is a great model, and it's certainly setting the stage that the rest of us are trying to emulate. Let's see, other thoughts or questions? Next steps. It sounds like some of you are saying you need to kind of look at the measures, so we'll get those out to you. Some of you are trying to kind of figure out what measures you might use, and I can certainly help in all of those conversations. I think as researchers, we're going to have another conversation and dialogue as we talk about other professional development needs and supports, and so we can certainly, if you have time between now and next week, to look through the measures, we can certainly pick up some of the conversation there and kind of go through it, or in that meeting we can set up a time for further conversation on it. I think we're at a point where, and you know, you've got some districts that are here on the phone with us, but I think we're at a point where we're trying to provide ideas to help support what the research would be, while also continuing to want the district to make sure that it fits with their vision and goals. And I know the frustration of, well, what if we're not sure yet what those vision and goals are? I would say then that doing a needs assessment cannot hurt at all. And if the goal is to be able to do something like that and get a report like I just showed you, not the focus groups per se, but just get a temperature gauge on these social emotional learning skills, it's going to drive a much deeper conversation and pretty quickly provide an opportunity for the district to come up with some ideas of where they want to work. I've seen it happen multiple times in the work we're doing, that this kind of data really helps them feel more confident in taking some action. So if you're dealing with that and you're feeling like you're just not sure where to start, it may not be that we actually decrease the number of measures. Maybe we throw them all in, and what comes back in the format that I showed you becomes, we can then facilitate that dialogue. So just food for thought on that. Reyes, are you sending the measures or the vendor? So the vendor, I'm not sure about the vendor. You were asking, I think, about the measures that we talked about today, and those are ones that I'm sending out. The information on each of the vendors, in terms of that part I'm not sure exactly what you got there. Lori and Andy are good. Okay. So when you said yes, I'm assuming you mean the measures that I talked about today, and you will get, I'm going to send you all a technical report. It doesn't have all the measures in it, but it gives you a good idea of those. And then Z and Dana, let's loop back and find the measures that are not in there and send them the items for the other measures as well, so that they've got those. And Z, you may actually, instead of the technical report, you may just want to send them the survey, the English version of the survey you did in China.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Why don't we
so
do
I
that?
have
You got
a
all.
PDF document, so I can share
Okay.
that document
Why
with everyone.
don't you share that? And then there are a few other measures that are not there. They're listed on the website. The importance of college is one that's not in there. Decide if that's something you want. You may not need it. But otherwise, you'll have the bulk of, you'll have all but I think that importance of school measure. So that should suffice. Good. Yeah, let's do that. Perfect. And then let's send that out to the research team, to the researchers and the project leads, all of them. So that way, and then just with a note, Dana and Z and Livonia, just a note saying that we just talked about this and people were interested, and just wanted to make sure everyone had a copy if they wanted to follow up.
And I noticed that Lourdes has written some stuff about, Fall River. And I just want to put out there that to her that certainly if I can be helpful in communicating with the school also in trying to assess where they're at, to please, don't hesitate to get in touch with me, because I'd be happy to have some conversations with Fall River as well.
Yes, especially I think that would really be helpful, and we'll make sure we get you looped in on Fall River for sure. Just so long as it's just a good dialogue, because I know that when there's high need, but I forgot Lord is very motivated, and it would be nice to be able to get some traction.
Yeah. So if I can be helpful, please reach out to me. Let me know.
All right. Any other comments or questions on that? So in terms of next steps, we're sending you all the survey, and it'll be all the items that you can look at. You've got the PowerPoints, you've got the different pieces there. I'm feeling, thank you, Reyes. I think we did a lot today. I apologize it's so loaded, but I just felt like I wanted you to get the see everything that's on that website, and certainly we've got information. Oh, something I wanted to tell you. So if we get a Qualtrics survey set up, which is our plan, you'll be able to access that Qualtrics survey, and then Dana and Z are going to help in providing you with the quantitative results. Unless, as researchers, the senior research group, you've got students that want to do that, that's not a problem. We can certainly get you the files, or we can include you as a team. But we'll try to do some of the background as needed, so that by the spring convening, we would have some data that you can talk about. So that would be the goal. We're on a tight timeline to do that, so people will have to decide pretty quickly. But Z says she can have it up in a Qualtrics survey very quickly, and we believe that the IRB that we're going to do for all of this will be exempt, because it's your evaluation that you're doing with your own students. So it's not a university-driven project. So we're feeling pretty quickly we can have this up and running in no time. And I would say, Z and Dana, let's focus the IRB just on the quantitative survey first, get that in right away, and then if people want to do the focus groups, we'll bring that one in second.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, then. All right, well, I think we're right there. Livonia, anything we missed?
No, I think that's it. Thank you all for being with us today and for sharing out. As always, feel free to email all of us, but if you would need something specifically, email me and I will get it to the right people. I will also share out Lisa's email, if that's okay with her, so that you can reach out.
Of course.
All right, Lisa, thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for being on these calls, too. It really helps. It's great to have the state actively connected to this, and also to hear kind of where the state's moving on things. It's very exciting.
Yeah, it's great to be part of it. I'm here every month, so if not before, we'll hear you again in another month.
All right. Take care.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.